We are going live. All right, we're live on Facebook and we're live on YouTube. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Poison Pen podcast. My name is Patrick. I am our science fiction and fantasy selector, but today I've got a really fun guest. A personal friend of mine, we introduced you to her last year for her book, Kitchen Witchery. Today, she is here to teach us about gardening with backyard gardening witchery. So the one, the only, the very famous Laurel Woodward. Laurel, welcome. Thank you so much for coming and agreeing to do this. This is great.
What a wonderful introduction. Thank you. And thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, Patrick.
Well, as you know, last year, if anybody was watching, and we had quite a few watchers. We've known each other forever, so you know we're good friends, and I'm excited that book 2 came out. So I'm like, we've got to do something to celebrate book 2. We've got to celebrate the fact that actually you're going to be, in fantasy terms, you're going to be doing a trilogy essentially of witchery books. But this is a really cool book because it's something that's, I think, dear to everybody's heart. Not only cooking, which you did in Kitchen Witchery, but backyard gardening or gardening itself, which is something that unfortunately, I think I have a black thumb, probably because I forget to water plants. And in Arizona, that's necessary. But
the kiss of death.
You are one of the few people I know who can grow lilacs in Arizona. You've got a real talent for it. So obviously, I mean, I'm going to call you the Martha Stewart of the New Age world. You can do everything. You can cook. You're a great gardener. What was it that got you into gardening and just started becoming really a master gardener?
Well, I grew up gardening. My dad always had a vegetable garden, and I did grow up gardening, and it's just something I've always had a love of. I grew up with the vegetable patch, and when I got my first house, the first thing I did was put in a vegetable patch. And then my interest, transferred to herbs. And as I picked up more gardening knowledge, I got interested in the history and the lore of plants, and I started just collecting it, writing it down, everything I found out about different plants. And it blossomed into this book pretty much. I wrote this big compendium and I divided it up, and half of it was the culinary herbs for kitchen witchery, and the other half became this one.
Well, the funny thing is you do talk about the culinary herbs an awful lot in Kitchen Witchery, although some herbs make a comeback. They're cast a character, so to speak, and you do revisit a few of them within Backyard Garden Witchery. Now, one of the challenges that we always think of in Arizona is are we a good place to actually garden? And you feel that we really are a great place to set up your own gardening.
Oh yeah, if you choose what grows there, if you choose heat-loving plants, like things I have trouble with here, like peppers and eggplant and okra and things like that, and squash and tomatoes, it will love it there. Providing that you do provide it some afternoon shades when in the heat of the summer and give it lots of water. But if you ignore it, of course, it will die.
Exactly. What was one of your challenges of creating a garden here in Arizona? Now, you live elsewhere now. You live in the Pacific Northwest, but
I did have a huge challenge there. Just as I would get everything going, we had 6 date palms that had to be cut. And the people who came, you have to cut date palms. It will rain dates for 3 or 4 months after if you don't cut them, and make rancid, fermented date stuff all over the ground that you walk in, it sticks to worse than gum on your shoe. So you really do have to cut them, but they would just let them fall and then destroy everything in the immediate vicinity, which pretty much was my backyard, was a garden, the entire backyard. So that was my huge angst, because that happened like every end of July. And pretty much ended things. So I would start in February and get everything done by then.
Exactly. Well, because that's sort of our winter, right? In Arizona, we go,
July, August,
February.
September. Yeah.
Exactly. And now we can start beginning to actually do some gardening. I've got some basil that I've got in the house at the moment right now that I want to try to get outdoors soon,
Mhm.
and do some other gardening. But right now we're still a little too hot. It's 104 today, but we'll
Yeah.
cool off in a couple hours and it'll actually be really pleasant. So, um, for us, doing that heat loving and getting the herbs, but by July, if I don't transplant some of those plants back indoors, it's
Oh
all
yeah. Yeah.
all gone.
The heat-loving Mediterranean plants like sage and rosemary and thyme do great. They will do great all year.
Exactly.
And you can have them in patio pots, so you could even have them, move them to the shade for the worst part of the year.
Exactly.
But cilantro would do well, and basil, of course, basil does not like the cold. Catnip and mint, all those do phenomenally well there.
It's sort of funny because I can make things grow if I actually pay attention and water them. And every year though, eventually, certain plants are just going to die, because especially indoor plants with me, I think I'm more, I don't know. But I found that, with Arizona, once July hits, things are going to be gone. There's a few things that you can keep going in the heat of the day. And one of the things that I found that works really well here is rosemary. And rosemary is a really important plant in your book. And so I'm hoping you could give us a little bit of an idea of why herbs are important, why we're wanting to grow them in abundance in our homes, what we can use some of these herbs for, and then how is it with gardening and gardening herbs that it changes the energies associated with our home and our habitat.
Well, I wanted to write this book because there was a huge push to get out in nature and do the bathing and all that stuff. And I wanted to tell people, nature's right outside your window. You just go outside. Just go outside and interact with the earth. You don't have to travel anywhere. And when we start our own garden and start interacting with the earth and get in sync with the seasons, it calibrates our energy too. And one easy way to do it is with herbs, because they are so easy to grow. And rosemary, it's a perennial. You plant it once, you have it forever. You can clone it. Clone's really easy. And it's good for so many things. You can season your food. You can make infusions to do magical washes for protection. You can, rosemary is for remembrance, so you can burn it as incense anytime you want to make something memorable. It's a very versatile herb.
That was one of my favorite plants I had at the house, and unfortunately I had to really cut it back, and then it got infested with unfortunately with butterfly caterpillar. They've smothered the plant, so at the very end of this rosemary bush's life, it was just filled with all these butterflies. And I said,
well, that's a good thing.
I can't let this, I've got to let this plant die, but I'm not going to cut it away and replant with a new rosemary plant until, it gave us all these really wonderful, I think it was monarch butterflies, to be honest.
Wow, that's great.
Beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. So, I mean, it is sort of amazing when you talk about magical washes and you talk about things that you're doing. What are those for those of us who are lay people to the Wiccan world? What can we think of them? Because we don't usually think of them as maybe magical, but maybe also.
All right. Well, basil is a great plant for harmony and cleaning up negativity. So if you have a basil plant and you make a tea with chip off, you just cut a couple sprigs and pour boiling water over it and let it sit for 10 minutes and then strain out the herb. and you put that liquid into your cleaning bucket, you can do a magical wash, which means that if you've had an argument or if you have family coming over and you want everyone to get along, you wash down your floors and your countertop, and it instills a feeling of harmony and peace and helps everybody be at their best.
Do you feel that that is something just sort of natural because of the pheromones, in the sense that certain things like basil gives off, and the different, compounds that make basil?
We do react a lot to scent. In a lot of ways, we don't even understand or know that we're reacting. But a lot of it is also programming ourselves. When we do these things, it's like meditation is a form of self-hypnosis. A lot of ritual work is also. So you're putting yourself, doing this work and putting yourself in mind that you are going to be on your best behavior. You are going to you're going to watch your words. You're going to help everyone else also be in there. So it's also a sort of it's a programming for what you want to happen.
So as you're creating these spaces and as you're doing this gardening, what is it that you're being mindful of as you're putting in, because you've got this big, beautiful garden, what are you thinking of when you are doing the garden itself and you're tending to each of these plants?
Well, when I planted it, when I started it, it was for my vegetable garden was to furnish my family with nutrients for health, for happiness and abundance and all of that. But I go out and talk to my plants every day, and if I see a new bud or a new pumpkin growing or a new squash or something, I'll go, "Oh, I see you," and I talk to my plants and go, "Oh, why are you falling over today? Let me help you prop up here. And, what's going on with you?" And it's, my kids think it's a little nutty, but I've always done that. I've always talked to plants. And I really feel that they respond to you when you do.
There's actual scientific evidence that plants do respond to our voice. They respond to our touch. They respond to us interacting with them, whether or not we can say that's a consciousness within the plant itself or a cellular response. I mean, in plant biology, my plant biology classes, we would have said that's just a cellular response, right? But they do say that plants grow better when exposed to music, exposed to talk. And I think there's a certain level of mindfulness and maybe a little bit of an awareness that they're being cared for and watched after.
There's so much interesting scientific study going on right now about plants. And there was a German forester who wrote the book about trees and how they communicate through a system of fungi in their roots, and how they care for each other and send messages when they're being attacked on one end so the trees on the other end can prepare for it. And I just read Thus Spoke the Plant, and it's just fascinating things. She, in her studies, she discovered that plants react very similarly as people do. I read this other one about this, the shaman was talking, I forgot which one it was, but he was talking about when the problem with the difference between herbal remedies that we grow ourselves and the difference of buying something made in a pharmacy is that when you take a plant under your care and you nurture it and you form a relationship with it, it ceases to be an ingredient and becomes an ally. And you get a much greater healing or whatever your intention is to support whatever you're trying to do than you do if you would just get a pharmaceutical product in a bottle.
So what would you say in Arizona would be the most medicinal plants to grow? What would you suggest us have in our garden at any given time?
California poppies for one. Well, it depends on what you want. For right now, where we are in this world with all the craziness going on, California poppies, lemon balm, even catnip, and oh, I can't think of others that would grow there well, but those are all nervines. And if you grow those, you can use them in all different things, from cooking with them to having them in teas, and they stimulate relaxation and make life happier, and you're not as crazed. You know, you can cope with things. They alleviate sadness and restore hope. California poppies grow like a weed there.
Mm-hmm. They do.
Yeah.
They really, really do. What would, in terms of, lavender is also another really good.
Yes, lavender is also nervine. You're right.
Also, and aloe. Aloe is,
Yeah.
but I don't know if you classify that as a nervine.
No,
you classify.
That would be a first aid plant, because it's so good for the skin and accelerating healing. Aloe is a wonderful plant, though I have one in a greenhouse here.
Oh, nice. To keep it, just to keep a little bit of your old home in your new home.
I have a bay tree too that I had in Arizona, and then it went to California with me, and now it's here.
Oh my gosh, how did you keep it alive over the course of
it was little, and now it's grown, and it would be huge, except that I use it all the time. It's a slow growing tree. It's been repotted like 4 times. But it just needs warmth. It could grow, they say it can grow in an 8 zone, which I am here, but it's not supposed to get below 20 degrees, and it does on occasion.
Exactly.
So
can you, for those of us who are pretty lay in terms of understanding our herbs, what are nervines? Because this is something we talked about a little bit beforehand, and I found really fascinating.
Well, a nervine is a plant with properties that that I don't know the clinical definition off the top of my head, but basically they relax you, they soothe you, they make life more pleasant. They make you cope. They balance emotions and give you energy to cope with anxiety and nervousness. And like lavender is one of the most well-known nervines.
Yeah, it's and that's one I think is pretty easy to grow here, and it's just absolutely beautiful. It smells good. It brings in the bees, which I really like.
And it's edible. You can cook with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Really good in ice cream. I'm an ice cream aficionado. Yeah. So I always say that that's one of the best things you can put into.
I flavor kombucha with it. It's one of my favorite kombucha flavors.
Now, in terms of that, let's say that you're going to be gardening for the home garden, for doing things like creating your own kombuchas, creating your own teas. What are some of your favorite plants to grow for your vegetables? And what are your favorite plants to grow for your herbs?
Well, my favorite vegetables are always squash and pumpkins, because they're so generous. You know, they start giving you things immediately until you have an overabundance. You're giving them away and feeding the animals and putting boxes together to send off with anybody who comes by, because you have just way too many. And, I just love that. And plus you can make so many things, from savory dishes to sweet dishes. I'm growing 3 kinds of pumpkins right now, and it's just fun, and they last a long time. Whereas a summer squash, you have to eat up pretty quickly.
Right.
A pumpkin will last until February. It's
if you store it right. I don't know if we could store them very well here in Arizona for as long as where you are.
I don't know. They might mold quicker. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But if you don't cut them, if you leave them whole and they've been they've been cured, set out in the sun and dried a little bit, they should last for a long time.
So in terms of, we had a great question that popped up on YouTube here, and I want to go back to it because they asked a really great question. Laura said, hi, Patrick and Laurel, very interesting topic. Does your new book have recipes for facial scrubs or balms?
No, my 3rd book does.
which is exciting too. But to be real honest, you do write a lot about different teas that you can make. For instance,
Yes.
in Backyard Garden Witchery, you've got some natural teas that you can use to kind of assist with healing a little bit, because you can't shy away from wellness when you're talking about gardening, or in your first book, Kitchen Witchery.
Right.
Both books are very much about wellness.
There are a lot of recipes, but a lot of them, and there are a few edible ones. There's a section of Kitchen Witchery. Most of them they're either a magical recipe or a garden recipe for a organic way to take care of some sort of pest or something, or a fertilizer.
What are your favorite natural organic fertilizers and your favorite natural pest repellents?
Neem oil for pests, which I've been using an awful lot right now on my squashes because I have a powdery mildew that's taking over, and I've had to clip all the leaves and then give them a good dose, and it really, really does well in controlling them. Vinegars work really well for different things. What was the first part of that question? I'm sorry.
Your favorite natural fertilizers, organic fertilizers, and your favorite organic pest.
I compost, and if you take time to enrich the soil with natural mulches and your kitchen cuttings that you've composted, that's the best fertilizer. But comfrey leaves are fantastic.
You had a really interesting little article in the book on comfrey. Can you explain what comfrey is and how you would create the fertilizer with comfrey?
Comfrey is pretty invasive. It grows like a weed. If you plant it, you have to kind of be careful because it can take over and it's hard to get rid of once it's established. But it's so good for plants. And if you just cut up a whole bunch and chop it up and stick it in a bucket with a lid and just let it percolate, it makes this amazing garden. That's condensed, and then you take the liquid and put it in water, and it is a great garden. It's a wonderful plant food. It's really high in different vitamins and things, and it's great for any sort of hungry plant like a squash or a tomato.
When you talk about fertilizers, and we're talking about witchery, we're not thinking that your book would be very scientific, but it really is. It isn't that you've negated the science behind what is good to grow a plant. It is using some of the herbs and growing some of the items to help with energies, to help with your own personal lives. That, again, that sense of mindfulness or meditation that comes to gardening. What are some of the things that you've learned that are incredibly scientific that you've sort of applied to your own gardening without being like Monsanto?
Scientific. Well, I guess everything pretty much is based in science, because I follow all the garden networks and apply everything that I've learned from them. And then I read a lot of garden books as well. I was reading one, and it wasn't for laymen. It was an advanced garden book about composting, and I forgot the name of it. But I got right into the middle of it, and the guy was describing how to create a tea for fertilizer, and he was talking about stirring it, and he said, and as you're stirring it, think about all of the wonderful things that it's going to do to your plants, and think about all the ways that you're going to use your plants, because our thoughts processes are going into this, formulate this. And it was wild. Right in this book, a gardening book, he was talking about your energy incorporating with the liquid. And I did quote that in this book because I found it so fascinating that it was in this volume. I wish I just read it so I could tell you, word for word what he said, but it's
hard because you're so neck deep into book 3.
oh
And we're
yes.
talking about book 2. So for those of you who aren't,
I have that dilemma where for the past month they handed it back to me for a complete rewrite, which they always do. Every book I've given them, they've said, "We love it. Sign this contract. Now our vision board came up with this. Here are the notes. We want you to do this, do this, do this, and delete this and add this." And they did that with this one. I had this is how you meet a garden ally. This is why it's important. My practice has changed. Every book is changed as my practice changes. For kitchen witchery, I was dealing with my psoriasis, stuck in an apartment in Los Angeles and learning about gluten-free. For backyard garden witchery, I was in Oregon with my new house with my garden, loving nature, home from COVID, just loving nature and celebrating having a yard again and a garden. And then COVID took over and isolation kind of hit, and I got sighted kind of my view went a little bleak, and I came up with garden witchery and how to use your natural nervevines in your garden to make you feel better and all of this. But I had a list of the nervevines. These are the nervevines I'm working with. This is how you grow them. This is how you use them. This is their history and lore. And they said, "This is great, but delete all this garden stuff. Put this in the back, and we want you to take all these recipes out and do this chapter, this chapter, this chapter, this chapter." So I wrote 13 new chapters and I had to come up with all these new things. And so you're right. It's been like 8 hours a day writing because I have to turn it back in October 1st.
I feel like this is like the test that you don't want sometimes, because you're so neck deep into writing book 3. But the exciting thing is I got to be a beta reader for Backyard Garden Witchery, and it changed a little bit between the time that you wrote and the time that it published. So you've got another book coming out.
I do have my new, I don't know if you could see it, but I got the cover. I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's Wellness Witchery, a magical approach to nourishing the body, mind, and spirit. And they did such a beautiful job on it. They know their market. They know, so I completely trust them.
So one of the neat things out of this book that I really liked with Backyard Garden Witchery is you talk about, for instance, burning candles using some of the things that you've grown and tried, creating your own smudge sticks.
Oh, yeah.
Something that I thought was really fascinating. I think of smudge sticks as something that you go to the New Age store and buy, right?
Yeah. You make your own.
Yeah. So what are some, when you're doing, I like smudge sticks just for the scent that it can provide a house. It can kind of clean it up a little bit. I know one of my sisters uses it to kind of adjust the energy. She believes strongly in this. What are some of your favorite ingredients for creating a smudge stick, and how do you create a smudge stick?
Well, you choose a plant that smells nice when it burns, and you look at what it can do, like sage, all the sages, even garden sage makes a really nice smudge. If you're having problem with the pesky neighbor talking behind your back, you can take lamb's ear. It puts up this tall thing, and if you take that stalk and wrap it in the sage and then make a smudge stick, that banishes, it ends gossip. So you can tailor them for your need.
Gotcha. So
rosemary makes a great smudge.
You don't have pesky neighbors where you live. I know where you live, and you're now in the middle of nowhere now. Yeah. I wouldn't call it middle of nowhere, but you're more remote. So what are some of your favorite things, because you're remodeling this entire farmhouse? You and your husband are going through and doing this beautiful remodel, basically doing it yourselves.
Yes, we are doing it ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for instance, when you came into the farmhouse, I saw the initial pictures. What was the
You
first?
were worried for me. I remember you saying,
I know I
"Oh,
was a little concerned
it
about
looks
that.
kind of haunted there." What's that stain on the floor? Was somebody murdered in that room?
I know. I was a little concerned. There was that bathroom that looked a little sketchy, Lori. I'm sorry, but yeah.
This whole
Yeah.
place looked sketchy. It really did. It needed no, the previous owner was an old man who got Alzheimer's and was moved out into his caretaker's house. So for 10 years, nothing happened here, and no one even lived here for 3.
Mhm.
So it was very neglected. But now it's getting new and refreshed, and we've added a room. We've replaced all the windows and the siding, put in new floors. We added a bathroom. It's completely changed.
So do you feel like that's part of the challenge of writing and why you feel like you might be a little bit under the wire for book 3 because that takes a lot of energy as
Because I
well.
have the great distraction of this project. Yes. Yeah. And that it's going to start raining in like 2 weeks, and we need to quickly finish the outside.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
You know,
I tend to, I'll get up and I'll write until like noon, and then I'll go help Andy do a few things, and then I'll finish up.
it cracks me up because every author I've talked with lately has talked about this last minute push for finishing up their books. So I'm obviously you're finishing up Wellness Witchery, and you've finished Backyard Garden Witchery, and that actually you finished that and it went to final edits, I want to say 6 months ago. That was March, wasn't it, when Backyard Garden Witchery went to your final?
I think so.
That's so, I mean, in terms of that, it takes a village. It's really weird and so now we're talking about publication, and it came out about a month or so ago, a
Yeah.
little over a month.
Mhm.
And our schedule here at the store has been so busy, it's taken us a while to collaborate on a time that would work for everybody. But it's amazing how much that process is of writing a book and really how it takes a village. And it's not that different from fiction in terms of when you're writing a nonfiction book, of that entire process of going from beginning to end in terms of edits. It sounds very, very similar.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot involved. And I really had no idea that the process was like this. Even working there at the store, I just didn't understand the challenges that you're faced with. Because after you completely turn it in, I mean, you read this thing, I don't know how many times, 8 or 9
Right.
as they hand it back to you and give it back and hand it back and ask for different changes. But then when you finally turn it in, they'll go, okay, here is a PDF. Now go get people to read it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, what? And so you ask everyone, will you read this for me, and ask for blurbs and things. And then when that's done, you go talk about it. So it's very involved.
I hope with Wellness Witchery you'll send it to me and I can blurb, my beard has never looked so lush or full.
I will. You got it. As soon as I have the PDF, I will send it to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a little bit different, but going back to Backyard Garden Witchery, I sell this book to a lot of people, and Kitchen Witchery, not oddly enough, was our top selling cookbook last year.
You know what? It made the bestsellers for Llewellyn. Yeah. It's been very popular.
And part of that is because though this has a new age spin to it, and I'm not trying to diminish new age at all. I hope that doesn't come across, but it's also incredibly practical for anybody who doesn't follow Wiccanism or witchery. Obviously, you have made it to the point of making it general enough as well that if you want to follow the new age practices, you go through and you discuss those, And you know, for instance, there was one, how to do some love spells,
Mm,
for instance,
mm,
with some of your cuttings in backyard garden witchery. But then you also get into the practicalities of composting.
mm.
And so I think it has this nice blend, and I think it's really fun to read. You
Well,
know,
I'm glad you enjoyed it. One of the people I sent it to said it was like a love letter to the earth, and I really like that because that
it
was
is.
where I was at, was celebrating nature and how my garden is my church and how you can have your own sanctuary too. You just have to go outside, you know.
Right.
Um, because I think all of us really need that connection. Um, and it doesn't matter what you term, if you term it magic or if you term it spiritual. We all need that connection to nature.
And it's, you know, I find myself really hard. I've got my day job that I'm sitting there programming most of the day,
Mhm.
you know, and then finding that time to get out, it's really therapeutic. Especially whenever I go on vacation, which is few and far between. I usually either run to the mountains or I run to the beach.
But I know you take your dog out walking at lunch,
Oh,
and that
absolutely.
really helps you and get the whole day
Exactly.
in frame of mind.
Paul's taking a nap somewhere. I might pull him up just at the tail end, just so you can see him again. He's got his bow tie on. He's looking very proud.
Aww.
But you know, and you know, I always feel like, um, you know, when you worked at the store, for instance, there's a spoiler here. Laurel and I have known each other for a really long time, partly through the Poison Pen. Um, and I think that one of the things that we would always do as well is pass back and forth urban fantasy to each
Yeah.
other, because I think you liked the wish the magic portion of it, and I always liked the adventure and the detective novel, so we'd always pass back and forth those books.
Do you
And
remember our
I
ghost
always
hunting club?
Oh yeah, we did the ghost hunting that one time, which
That
was a
was
lot of
fun.
fun,
Yeah.
which is why I have a complete belief in that, from living in a house in Still, Colorado, that was super creepy. We came home, you know, the
Yeah.
awesome. Oh, it was a weird house. Anyways, I believe that places have energy, hold energy. It's just it's it's what I believe, and I'm good with that. Um, what is one of the most surprising things that you learned in backyard garden witchery? Because you did a lot of research for this book, and you did a
I
lot of
did.
gardening to make it practical.
Most surprising. I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. Um,
Well, like with kitchen witchery, you could make a bread and you could give it to Andy and say, Andy, try this bread. Is this good? Is
I
this a
still do
good
that.
is this a good recipe? And he can give you feedback, right? Gardening, it's a little bit more, I would find, with the practicality of it, a little bit more challenging, because you've got
Mm,
plants time to grow. Not every plant is the same. Some will bear fruit, some
yeah,
won't.
yeah.
And so how do you do that? How do you cope with something that is living and is different, and
You
uh,
spend time with it and you learn its habits and you just try to help it survive. There, I know I had a lot of challenges. They just won't come to mind right now. One of the things last year though, my squash just kept turning, the leaves kept turning yellow and it wouldn't flower, wouldn't flower, wouldn't flower. So I started with experimenting with different foliar feedings, giving it nutrients in a spray bottle and just letting it soak into its leaves. And that fixed it. But I can't think of something that was surprising off the top of my head right now. But I know there were a whole bunch of things.
I've had on Facebook, one of the questions is, um, if you couldn't have become a writer, what other job would you have done? And I think this is really interesting, because knowing you, You've always been a writer.
Yeah, I have always been a writer. So I would have been a writer, I just wouldn't have been published because I have written a bunch of novels that aren't published.
Right.
You've read a couple.
They're great. They're really
Yeah.
fun. They just, you know,
Um,
um,
but I would probably be a cook, or I love animals. Maybe working with animals in some form. Um, Worked in a bookstore.
yeah, you work.
I love those days. Those days were fantastic.
Yep. You kept our events coordinated, and
That was a lot of fun.
it was a lot of fun.
Mhm.
And so in terms of that, you've always been around books, but you've also been a really awesome mom. I mean,
Oh,
I think that was your most important job right there.
yeah, yeah.
We've had
Definitely.
a couple of your kids work for us over the years, and now they're grown, which is sort of
Yeah.
scary. Um,
I would
but
have loved to have been a librarian, I think.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one of our former employees here, Megan, who works for
Mhm.
uh, Sh-
Crystal Lake, Chicago.
Crystal, yeah. So she's done some programs with you as
Mhm.
well, and
Yeah.
you've done some library programs. So you've been a big supporter of libraries. And I've known you since I worked at a library working and
Yeah.
at the circulation desk. And I remember your little kid would come up with her hand to get the stamp, very
I
shy.
remember
She's
that.
no longer very shy,
No,
which is
no.
awesome. And she has a little kid of her own,
Yes.
which is really
Yeah.
cool.
Mhm.
Um, so in terms of after wellness is done, do you
Mhm.
have plans for more books, or do you feel like
Yes.
it's going to be
Well, I have a challenge where I have a grandson coming to live with me, so I don't know how that will affect my time frame, but I already have a fourth one in the works, and it's the care and feeding of household spirits. And it's it's uh it's it's whispering in my ear right now. So
so there's always an idea, there's always something percolating behind, because
mhm,
I know that you've written a lot of articles and you wrote a lot, and before Kitchen Witchery came out,
mhm,
gosh, you must have written 60, 70, 80 articles for
yeah,
different online magazines at
mhm.
least. You really wrote your you really did you worked hard to become a nonfiction writer. What would your recommendation be for those who want to write nonfiction or who want to write fiction? What is it that empowers you and impassions you to write and to have become, because I've got to say both books have really an incredible voice. I mean, your voice comes in
Oh,
wonderfully, and
thank
that's a
you.
challenge to do with nonfiction. They're both books that you want to read cover to cover.
Well, regardless of what you're writing, you just have to do it. You just have to, and you'll have some terrible days where you don't, might get one paragraph out, and then you'll have those fire days where you just, write and write and write and write, and you might throw it all out the next day or put it in a cut bits folder, but you need to write every day. That is what creates you, is just doing it. You just do it.
Now, with
Enjoy it. Just do it and enjoy it.
so in your publishing process, you've every time you've said you've come through, you've given Llewellyn your book, and they say, "Okay, this is brilliant."
They say, "Oh, we love it. Here, please sign this contract." And then you
Uh-huh.
sign it and send it back, and they go, "Okay, it's going to the vision board. Here are our notes. We want you to delete this and move this and change this and add this." And it becomes a completely different book. And that's okay. I'm fine
Yeah,
with that. It's hard work, but you have a team who supports you and will put you in the right direction, and they know what they're doing.
exactly. Now, what's it like working with the largest new age publisher in the United States?
Well,
Because
I have
they're
my own
on
little team. So, and I've had these same two women editors for all my books, and they're very good, and they know their stuff. Um, and they tell me they tell me what I need to do in terms that I can understand how to do it. They're just wonderful. And then I have a beautiful cover artist, and then it goes to, it's proofread 3 different times.
Right.
So I have a team that creates these for me.
It helps. It helps shape the book just to make it more polished, more
Yeah.
clear, more precise. I've got to say that your book, one of the things I truly love about Backyard Garden Witchery is the fact that regardless of where you live in the United States, I think that you've provided each person with a lot of tools to go into their backyard and to actually grow and to create their home into whatever they want it to be. And you've provided us with a lot of good knowledge. For instance, one of my favorite blurbs is on catnip, which I had no idea catnip was as useful for people as it is. I just always thought it was fun to give to my cat and watch him roll around on it and then lay on top of it and just have a good time. And the other cat, didn't care for it, didn't need it, but the other one absolutely loved his cat.
It's funny how that is that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, you give us some really practical tools on how to use some things that we've never really thought of, maybe not necessarily using in our garden.
I also covered garden basics where, you find out what you have to work with. You find out what your soil type is. You find out what your grow zone is. You find out how much sunlight you have in different areas. And then you can buy plants who meets those needs. If you have a woodland garden, you can't grow vegetables because they need 8 hours of sun.
Right.
So you have to. Gardening is easy if you choose to grow what will grow well in the zone that you have, in the area that you have, whether it's a patio with pots or a balcony or a woodland area or a desert. There are plants that will grow happily and thrive in those zones. And if you figure that out, you will be successful and gardening will be a joy.
One of our customers, Pat, she has a question. She says, what got you into backyard garden witchery? So our backyard witchery. So I would give a guess also maybe witchery in general. What in terms of Wiccanism, what is it that draws you?
Okay, well, I'm not a Wiccan. I am a solitary practitioner, pagan. Just so you know.
Okay.
But, I became a magical person through my garden. Learning about different plants and the lore and how to use them and how they were used in the past just spoke to me. And it introduced me to a lot of new ideas. And I learned how to meditate, and I learned how to sharpen my awareness, and I learned how to open my awareness to signs and synchronicities and just the things going on around me. And I started talking to my plants. And I experimented with them and took note on how I reacted to them and how they reacted to me. And it's just, my life became magical.
Are there any plants that you don't grow well?
Oh yeah, a million, I'm sure. I tend to stick with my successes. When I learned how to clone, and when I learned what's easy to clone, like passion fruit, passion flower, that's another nervine. You can make teas out of the leaves. You can do all kinds of things with passion flower, but it grows like a weed here. And you can, we were visiting somebody in North Portland, and they had this huge bush of passion flower. And I said, may I take a cutting? And they said, of course. And I took it home and I made a whole bush, and now I brought it up here, and it's in my greenhouse. And I love the ease of plants like that. Like roses, you can propagate really easy. I have all kinds of roses from all over my neighborhood in Tigard up here, just because I love roses and they're so easy to grow. I tend not to grow plants that are hard to grow because I don't want the challenge.
Exactly. Or, you know,
Mhm.
you did those lilacs, which was amazing, but those were really hard to grow in Arizona.
Um, you have to find a variety that can live in your zone, and you have to spend the time to meet their needs.
Right.
Once you do that, though, things that drought-loving things like cactus cannot grow up here; they'll go rot.
Yeah.
Tropical things get burned down there unless you keep them inside or on the patio. You just learn their habits and you meet their needs, and you'll be a success.
So, who were your inspirations? What inspired you to become a writer, and who do you feel were your most significant, um, I guess, yeah, who are the most significant writers that you found that sort of inspired you to want to write?
Well, I've always been a writer since I was a little kid. Um, but as a teenager, it would have been Stephen King.
Hmm.
As get a little bit older, then it was Dean Koontz.
Hmm.
I've always had the creepy horror thing going on. And then Dan Simmons.
Hmm.
I think he just recently died. Oh, no, that was Peter Straub.
That was Peter Straub. Yeah.
Yeah, Peter Straub, who I also loved. Um, but I love a good story. I love a good, I'm in crime fiction right now. I'm reading all the old lady books and loving them.
It's not a bad thing. I do have to recommend, if you haven't read Richard Osman's,
I have. I love those.
and the
I
new one
love
just came
those.
out, so I've got
Yeah.
that on my to be read list. But one of the nice things is that because I think you were so influenced by fiction, your nonfiction does not read dryly. And I think that that was another thing that I really liked about Kitchen Witchery and Backyard Garden Witchery, is the fact that you can just sit there and relax and read into it and learn an awful lot and be entertained as much as you're learning from it. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of nonfiction books.
Hmm. I tell a lot of stories about how I work with things and use things and my experiences.
Mhm.
And so with the whole narrative thing, I think it, kind of changes the mood.
It does. It feels like a conversation rather
Yeah.
than, you know, in zone 9, plant
Right.
X here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Make sure that the pH is such and such, and then go on with your life. You give us a lot more detail and a lot more enjoyment. So one of the nice things is having a relationship with you, Laurel, is that we were able to send you books, and you were
Mm.
gracious enough to sign both Kitchen Witchery and Backyard Garden Witchery for us again. So for those of you who want to support Laurel and want to make sure that more books like hers get published, certainly more programs like this get on air. You can buy from the Poison Pen. Our accounts go back to Llewellyn, and of course, then they give Laurel a paycheck and say, "Here you go, write more." And we can watch her cram every October, usually around the time when we start talking about these
Yeah.
things. Um, so you said that Wellness Witchery is just about done. You're just about done going into your edits.
Mm.
What are you looking forward to most? I mean, how much time do you have once you send it in? Will they send you in and say, here's some rewrites?
Well, if it's like it was last time, my first editor will read it and say, "Oh, this is great. Now cut 20,000 words." That's,
Mhm.
that's what happened last time. um, I don't know what's going to happen. I think I'm closer now to following what they like, just because done it 3 times.
Right.
I've learned a little bit of their model and what they are looking for. I'm not sure, but I know that they will hand it back to me. And then when they have the PDF, they'll hand it back to me to shop for blurbs. And then when it's completely done and everything is set, right before it goes to print, they hand it to me to read through again to make sure there aren't any errors. And in Kitchen Witchery, I found a big error in the very first recipe. Half of the flour got cut out. And I was able to say, stop the presses. We have to put this back in. And they got it right in. They fixed it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of reading of the same thing over and over and over again.
So Pat has a really good question for you. She says, I have weeds in my garden that I've never had to deal with before. Bad vibes? Ever sage a garden? So what would you recommend for her to do?
Well, I think you should see what they are. Find out what kind of weed it is. Is it a weed or is it just a plant that you haven't met yet? A lot of the things that we call weeds are actually herbs, and some of them are edible, some of them are medicine plants. A lot of them came here from the old world. They were brought here by the people who came over as medicine or something. So I strongly suggest you find out what they are first. And then once you decide that they really are a weed, if you want to get rid of them, just pull them. But you might make a new friend.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know.
Or maybe that it could be something that's good for it, but it can be challenged because you got to let it grow, right, to be able to identify what it is.
No, if you use one of the plant apps now, there's so many out there. You can snap it when it's pretty young, and it'll tell you what it is.
Oh, that's good to know.
And some plants, are great. If it's a native plant, it might be great for the environment, or it might be important for some species of butterfly. Just get to know it and see what it is, and see if you can make it have value.
That's like the rosemary bush. Like I said, last year it finally died, but as it was dying, it made itself a home for monarch butterflies, and I just had all these monarch butterflies that came out of that dying rosemary bush, which was really kind of neat.
Yeah.
It was fascinating. So Laurel, what would you recommend in terms of, as we're getting close to fall, some parts of the country we already are in, how can we prepare our gardens for next spring?
Well, that completely depends on where you live. A lot of places, just leave it and wait. Some you cover with a plastic to, if you're in a hot spot, it will kill all the seeds and make it, ready to plant next year. You can mulch it really good. That's what my zone I'm in. That's what I do. I have to mulch around anything that might need protection from the winter, but it doesn't freeze here. And it doesn't do a hard freeze here. So a lot of things winter really well, but my tender perennials, like my dahlias and things like that, I do mulch really heavily. And if we're going to have a winter storm where I know it's going to be really cold, I will turn a plastic garden pot over them. I have them marked where they are, and I'll set it on top just to give them some added protection if it's going to be frost or something, or snow.
I'm amazed you can have your own corn.
I have a cornfield. I know, it's awesome. Yeah. It's awesome. And a pumpkin patch. Yeah, this is the first year I've ever had a cornfield. I've always tried growing little patches of corn, but I actually have a cornfield. I sent because I came over yesterday. I sent home a box of corn.
You've got a lot of vegetables, so you can certainly feed a giant family with that. So, and the apocalypse will be coming first.
My freezer's full of shredded zucchini and blackberries.
Zucchini did really well here this year. I've got to say, we had a lot of zucchini by the time we had a few customers who grow zucchini, and they came by with their extra zucchini.
Yeah.
'Cause I think they were a little sick of zucchini by the time that we got
I've
them,
been
but
trying to give
those are
it
really
away.
good.
I've been trying to give it away to anybody who'll take it because I have a mountain of zucchini, and every day I go out and there's 5 or 6 new ones.
Mhm.
So
It's just a bumper crop of
it
zucchini
is
this
a
year.
very generous crop.
Exactly. They make wonderful zoodles. So
Yeah,
I gotta
yeah,
say,
they do.
my favorite way to use zucchini. So Laurel, we know you've got a new book coming out probably next fall is our
Mhm.
guess. So we're going to be talking with you again real soon. However, as time goes on, again, for those of you who want to buy a signed copy, we are one of the few bookstores that have them. Um,
Mhm.
we
We're the
love
only
Laurel.
bookstore that has them.
We're the only bookstore that has them,
Yeah.
and you can buy it, support the program, support Laurel. And thank you, Laurel, for spending time with us and just having a really nice chat about your book. It's always wonderful to see you.
Always a pleasure, Patrick. Always a pleasure.
So to our Facebook audience tonight, we will say good night. Thank you for watching. And um Laurel, I'll talk to you real soon.
Thank you, Patrick.
All right, take care,
Good
guys.
night.
Thank you so much. Good night.